This evening is a special evening, and I'm going to be speaking about a subject that is very dear to my heart, and that is my relationship with a teacher that I had. His name is Meir Tamari, Dr. Meir Tamari. He was a PhD in economics and ethics. Meir Tamari passed away on the 20th of January in Israel, where he has lived since 1950. Why am I speaking about Meir Tamari? There were other rabbis who passed away just this week. Terrible loss to Klal Yisrael. But I'm not qualified to speak to their passing. I am qualified, my heart is qualified to speak about my relationship with Meir Tamari. Let me go back to when I met Meir. I met Meir in 1980 when he came to Pacific Jewish Center, the shul on the beach. And he was a visiting scholar. What I didn't know at that time was that the reason he came to Venice, at that time he traveled the world. He was a lecturer in 5 continents. He spoke on business ethics, economics, and to Jewish audiences on Torah and Tanakh. But he came here because his teacher, Rabbi Avram Chaim Lapin, came to Venice every week. He lived in San Jose. I'll tell you a little background on Meir Tamari before I start. Meir Tamari was born in 1927 in South Africa to a secular Jewish family, upper middle class Jewish family. His father was a businessman. And Meir, at the age of 14, decided that he wanted to become religious. In South Africa in 1941, that was a real unusual desire. And there weren't many people who were religious, but he found the Orthodox congregation of Cape Town, and the rabbi of that congregation was Rabbi Lapin. And Rabbi Lapin guided him. And that connection with him and Rabbi Lapin lasted all of Rabbi Lapin's life until about 30 years ago. Meir Tamari was the most unusual man, one of the most unusual men I've ever met. He was a man that looked like he walked out of the Tanakh. He looked like he walked out of the Bible. He did not look like a person you saw on the street. His beard, his demeanor, his face, his voice. He spoke very distinctly with a British accent, even though it was South African. And when he looked at you, he pierced through you with his glance, as if he could see through you. When he spoke to you with the authority, not his personal authority, but he spoke to you with the authority of, I am here, I'm conveying something very important. I'm a messenger of some kind of truth. And that kind of truth is embodied by the Torah, by the Tanakh, and it's the ideal of the Jewish people. Why is that important? Because in 1980 or 81, I was a novice in that. I really desperately wanted to know what the ideals of the Jewish people were. Even though I was a Jew since I was born, nobody spoke of what's in Judaism, what's in the behavior of a Jew, what is in the performance of the Torah that makes Jews special, that connects us to something eternal, that maybe would perfect us in the world to be able to create a better world. Why is it worth it? Why are we learning what we're learning? Why are we practicing what we're practicing? We're not doing it to please God. God could be pleased without us. We're really doing it in a selfish way because each of us in the deepest part of our heart is an idealist. Each of us dreams of fulfilling our purpose in this world. And meeting Meir Tamari was meeting such a man that he lived for the expression, the teaching, the emulation of Jewish behavior as he learned it in the Tanakh and in the Torah. This morning, I opened the Siddur, and the first word on the page was be'emet. Be'emet is a very powerful word. Be'emet means in truth. And as I began my prayers this morning, I don't begin from the beginning. I often open up the Siddur to any particular page and start wherever I am starting. And that word, be'emet, was Dr. Tamari saying to me, I'm here and I'm going to be with you to guide you and tell people what I stand for. So the rest of the sentence, I'll see if I can show it to you. This is the sentence from the Siddur, and it says, Be'emet, v'sim chelkenu imahem uleolam lo nevosh ki v'cha betachnu baruch atah Adonai mishan umivtach letzadikim. Many of you will recognize this. This is one of the 19 prayers in the Shemona Esrei, and it says, Be'emet, in truth, put my portion with them. Who am I asking Hashem to put my portion with? What does that mean? Put my portion with them. Uleolam lo nevosh, and let me never be ashamed. When my portion is with them, we'll find out who them is, I will never be ashamed. Ki v'cha betachnu, because in you we trust. Baruch atah Adonai, mishan, blessed is God. We ask God to move us into this way, that God is our mishan, is our staff, is our support, amivtach, is our trust, litzadikim, to the tzadikim. Meir Tamari was a tzaddik. What is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is somebody who can do anything he wants. He's got the power. He's got the personality. He's got the ability to go in the world and be anybody he wants. He's got the intelligence. The doors are open for him, and he chooses to serve Hashem in the way that brings the most glory to Hashem. And Hashem is his strength, and Hashem is his trust and his power. So let me give you an example, the best way I can. What Meir Tamari wanted to do in the Jewish world, at least, was to teach two things: ethics, which we know as musar. Musar is how does Torah look when it's applied? What does a person look like, act like, speak like? What's the dance we put to the music of Torah? How do we hear that music? How do we become interpretive of that dance and do our own dance to bring the greatest glory to Hashem? And the second thing is he taught applied Torah in terms of business. Now, when we talk about business, it's not just business, because business in the way he taught it was things that have to do with money. For instance, tzedakah, a charity, loaning money to people, making agreements, business agreements with people, keeping your word, being generous, what it means to have a responsibility towards the community and how you share your money in the community. Now, we, of course, know that there is tithing. We know that traditionally Judaism had a tithing system where we supported the priests and the Levium, and we also supported the poor. We were an agricultural society, and we lived with constraints, Hashem's constraints, trusting that Hashem would give us everything we needed. So the whole basis of money in Judaism is based upon the trust that Hashem gives us everything that we need, and that everything that Hashem gives us is entrusted to us according to Hashem's will. So we would become like a trustee. And the agreement from the maker of the trust, so to speak, God, who hands me a livelihood, is to say, I'm giving this money to you, I'm giving this ability to speak, I'm giving you this power in the world to do mitzvahs, to interact with people, to care for people, to help people, with these particular obligations. And Meir Tamari emulated that. That's all he spoke about. That's who he was in public. But I'm here to share something more than that with you. Something very personal, two things personal. It's personal about me and personal about Meir. First, I'll start out with a story. There was a man, and this is like a mushal in a way. It's not about Meir Tamari, but it's about what I mean to say. There was a man named Rainier Maria Rilke, who was a poet, a writer, and he could not find himself. He could not get his chops, so to speak. He needed to find his guiding light, his strength. He knew that he could write. He knew that he could express himself, but he didn't quite understand how to do that. So in the guise of being a journalist, he traveled from where he lived to Paris, France, around the end of the 19th century. And he sought out a man named Auguste what's the sculptor's name? Blanking out. How can I do that?
Michelangelo?
I'm sorry?
Michelangelo?
No, the sculptor who made the Thinker and Rodin, right. Auguste Rodin. He went to meet Auguste Rodin, and if you've ever seen a picture of Auguste Rodin, he's an extremely imposing man. He's a very strong, imposing, powerful man. And the way Rodin worked, he was one of the most prolific artists of that time, probably the most prolific artist. He worked 15 hours a day. He had a studio where he was producing the most amazing art in the world. And he was, so to speak, he had his chops as an artist. He had his chops as doing what he was created to do. And Rilke went and said, I'd like to write a story about you, Mr. Rodin. And Rodin said, sure. And Rilke said, can you tell me what makes an artist great? And Rodin says, I'm busy. So Rilke said, okay. And he came back another day. He said, Rodin, would you please tell me what is necessary? What do I need to do to become a great artist? He says, I'm busy. So Rilke went away. Finally, a third time he came and he said, Mr. Rodin, would you please tell me what I need to do to become a great artist? And Rodin understood if somebody comes back 3 times after being rejected, you have to answer him. You have to open your door to receive him. So that's what Rodin did. And Rodin said, take your notebook and go to the Gardin de whatever it was. There was a zoo in Paris, a small zoo, Jardin, I forget what the name is. And he says, go there and find an animal in the zoo and watch it and do not write a word. Just watch the animal, observe the animal until you can't stop yourself from writing. Do not write, but stand there, watch the animal, and when you're finally can't help yourself and you start writing, then write. So that's what Rilke did. And he went and he found the panther in the cage. And I invite you to go read the Rilke's poem of the panther. But when you read his poem, this was the first transformative poem this great man wrote. He had, how do I say it? It changed his heart. Somebody has to want to change and find a teacher and be able to be at that teacher's will, where that teacher is pushing him off and that teacher is giving him some pushback, some blowback, until the student finally is able to hear and apply what the teacher says to do. And that's what Rilke did. And this is what I did. Although I wasn't as intentional 40 years ago as I am now, but I knew that I needed a teacher. I knew that I needed to ask a man such as Meir Tamari how to model myself as a Jew. It wasn't enough to say that what I learned in Hebrew school or even opening the Torah is going to be how you live as a Jewish man. I no longer wanted to guess what to do. I didn't want to be a Jew according to mitzvot. I wanted to be a Jew from the inside out, just like Rilke wanted to, like Rodin said, until you cannot help yourself, till it explodes from the inside out, who you are, what you see, your interaction with the world is going to be so connected that you will be that artist. So, Meir Tamari. So what did I do? Every opportunity I had, I would go talk to him, listen to him. I said, can I drive you someplace? Can I do something for you? And of course, he took advantage of that. He lived in Israel. When he was in Los Angeles, he needed some help, and I helped him. And over a period of time, he came regularly. I spent more and more time with him, and so did a lot of people. I wasn't the only one. But over time, I observed how Meir Tamari, as a prolific living Jew in the sense of the prophets, in the sense of a larger than life, in the sense of an idealist who did not compromise his values, in terms of a man who moved to Israel when he was a young man. He gave up his life as a young South African economist and said, I'm going to live on a kibbutz because the kibbutz is going to be the model of the economics. It's going to be the model of Jewish ethical life. He delivered himself to the kibbutz of 1950 in Israel as a young man. And that's where he was until for 10 years until that experiment showed him that that's not where it was going to happen. He had hoped that the rebirth of Israel would happen through the model of communal living on the kibbutz, the model of ideal living in a Torah, Zionist religious life. And he, during that time, he married, he raised a family, and he shared this with me. And he shared with me how he was disappointed. And he went from the kibbutz to work at the bank. He worked in a kibbutz. He was a man with a PhD who worked in a kibbutz for 12 years or 10 years, driving a tractor, digging ditches, building fences, doing stuff, and being a teacher on a kibbutz. And after 10 years, he had a family, he had a wife. He wanted to support them. So he went to work for the Bank of Israel. And in a few years, he became the chief economist of the Bank of Israel. And that was 1967. In 1967, he began putting his ideas in writing. And different universities, different institutions in Europe, in Asia, in America, in Canada, in the Commonwealth, wanted to hear him, wanted to meet him, wanted him to share his innovative ideas that he had constructed on the kibbutz that applied to business, that applied through his observation as a Jew. The world wanted to hear this man, this Jew, and that's what he did. He traveled the world. Let's come back to me and Meir Tamari. So the typical meeting between Meir Tamari and I was where we sat down at a meal. He would say, let me make you some food. He would cook me a meal. Every time I saw him, he would go and cook something, or he'd give me something he cooked. And he'd roll up the sleeves on his arms, and his arms didn't look like the arms of a rabbi. His arms were thick and hairy with black hair. I mean, when he rolled up his sleeves, this was the Jew of the Bible. This was not the Jew of the yeshiva, but this was the Jew he became from South Africa on the kibbutz. Yet he still wore the long black, the knee-length black coat, a foot-long beard, but his mind, his personality was so far in the future and so far beyond other people's minds that people were scared of him. And I love that. I loved that wherever he went, and I would go with him, I was like his assistant, that people would kind of be like put off a little bit, and they didn't realize that he was just a joker. They didn't realize that, he could do anything he wanted. He had the brains to be able to eat 50 kinds of treif and make it kosher. He had the brains and the ability to do anything that he wanted. And he could play. But he still said, I'm going to do whatever is right and what's ethical, and I'm going to teach what's right and ethical. But yet he showed me his inside. He showed me his I don't want to say his bigger view of the world. And that appealed to me so much. It appealed to me because he said, the Torah isn't for you to become it's not that the Torah is something you imbibe. The Torah is something that you enhance. Your personality beautifies the Torah. You are a person just like a character in the Torah. You become a person who's in the Torah. You become an Avraham or a Yitzhak or a Sarah or a Rivka or a Rachel. You become a Miriam. You become a prophet. You become that person in this world through your noble actions, through your creativity, through your inspiration of other people, through your raising the ethical level of the world around you. That's how he lived. And it was so refreshing and it was so exciting. And most people didn't know that he just did it so lightly. Nobody knew that he held up like 1,000-pound weights, like he's holding, apples or something like that. He had that ability, and that was so beautiful. And that demonstrated to me, it gave me a model for me to be able to design my personality where I didn't say, am I going to be judged by other people? But how can I live a Torah life and exemplify ideals and ethics and behavior? How can I exemplify through my personality and my actions and my speech? How can I exemplify to add to the Torah? I don't mean like I'm going to add something that's not in the Torah, but add something that is consistent with the Torah. In other words, being a religious no longer becomes like a weight on your shoulders. It becomes a way to enhance your individuality. It becomes a place where you put on the coat of many colors. It becomes a place where walking in the land of Israel is like walking through history. It becomes a place where the Jewish people become literally your family, and the people of the world are people that you care for and that you have a responsibility towards. And this is what I saw in Meir Tamari. I don't know what else to say, really. I mean, that's I'm going to say a couple things that are really maybe that touched me, and then one story. Meir Tamari passed away last week at 94 years old. And up until a couple months ago, he was still writing Divrei Torah every day. He was still publishing to the internet. He was still corresponding with people around the world. But one thing that happened to him was about 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, he had a stroke. And the stroke caused him to lose part of his ability to speak. And he slurred his language, his speech was slurred. And he became very self-conscious because it was so important for him to communicate, and people had a difficult time understanding him. I myself could not talk to him on the phone. I had to sit with him and look at his face and listen to him. And that was the beginning of his being separated from the world. And that caused him a huge amount of pain. And I held that pain with him. I mean, when I was with him and I was with him because he had to learn face to face with somebody. And there were not many people who traveled to meet him face to face in his 80s or his 90s. When I was with him, he revealed to me his deepest self. Again, we're talking about this man who now is declining in his health, declining in his ability to speak, basically being withdrawn from the world, being withdrawn from his what he felt was his purpose in life. He was losing it. He now only could communicate in writing. He no longer could speak on the phone or even on the internet, and other than writing. And he was being in some way rejected or forgotten. That's how he felt. So it became part of me as a friend to comfort him and to be there with him. 4 years ago, I'm going to conclude with this story. 4 years ago, he no longer could travel to, he had trouble traveling, and he no longer could travel to Los Angeles. But he did arrange to be in Miami for I think a month. And I agreed. I wanted to. I sort of invited myself to Miami, and I spent 5 days with Meir and Devorah in Miami Beach. And I stayed in their apartment. I ate with them. I learned with Dr. Tamari every day. And one day, and this is a man who now was, from his stroke, also had trouble walking. He says, "Milton, take me to the ocean." I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" "Take me to the ocean. Put me in the ocean. I want to swim. Take me to the ocean." So we went down. I took him to the ocean. We went to the beach. He changed in the cabana. I changed. And he kind of like, basically, had a great deal of difficulty walking to the ocean. And I walked with him. I supported him. And when we got to the edge of the ocean, he said, "Milton, pick me up." I picked him up. He said, "Carry me in the ocean." I carried him in the ocean. He said, "Take me out further." I took him out further. He says, "Fantastic. Let go of me." I let go of him. And he started swimming, and his beard was floating all over, and he was smiling, and he looked like a guppy, looked like the happiest man in the world. And for as long, I mean, it just seemed like forever. He was swimming, he was on his back, he was turning over, he was playing, he was laughing, he was happy. He says, "All right, Milton, take me back." So I actually took him back closer to the beach, and then I lifted him up, and I'm carrying him to the beach. And I realized all the people on the beach were looking at us, looking at me carrying this man, this long beard, this very unusual man. I'm carrying him. I put him down. He gets up on his feet and walks totally straight, proud, upright, like just so proud and upright to the cabana. And that was my last outing, so to speak, with Meir Tamari. The times I saw him later was just in his apartment. But I wanted to share those things and how important it was for me to find a teacher and to encourage people, everybody in this world, if you have a chance to find a great teacher, man or woman or whatever, however you find somebody, to learn, to be inspired, to have them push you beyond your limits, to push you beyond anything that you think you can do, to test your patience, to demand things from you that you couldn't understand, to be able to put up with rejection like Rilke did when Rilke kept asking and Rodin pushed him off, and to be able, once you get an instruction, to follow it to the letter and trust in the wisdom of your teacher. Trust in the wisdom of your teacher. Anyway, I have a couple of minutes for questions, and I hope that I brought some Meir. I hope that I didn't misspeak. I hope that I spoke about you properly, and I hope I showed you how much I love you, Meir. May you have peace and glory always. Anybody have any questions? Nope? Okay. Thank you so much for joining me.
I have one question.
Yes, yes.
You said that Rabbi Dr. Tamari came to Los Angeles because Rabbi A.H. Lappin was his rabbi, his mentor.
It was Rabbi Lappin was the one who makaroved, young Meir, 14-year-old Meir Tamari.
Uh-huh. So from your observation, was Rabbi Tamari's relationship to Rabbi Lapin similar or parallel to your relationship with Rabbi Tamari?
No,
What was the
no.
difference in the relationships?
I think that Rabbi Lapin lived a charmed life in the eyes of Meir Tamari. Meir Tamari felt that Rabbi Lapin was just the luckiest man in the world, the most charmed man in the world, that people loved him, and that when he came to Los Angeles, he attracted large crowds, and that his personality was different. Meir Tamari's personality was very different, and Meir Tamari earned his connection in the world much harder, and not through his personality, but through his strictness, or through the strength of his will, and not through his charm. Anybody who knew Rabbi Avram Chaim Lapin knew that a lot of what he accomplished was through not only his perfect Torah, but his perfect Torah and his charm and his people skills. Meir Tamari did not have that level of people skills, and he knew it, by the way. He talked to me about it. He cried to me about it. He said, I wish I had those skills that Rabbi Lapin had. He said, how come wherever I go, people stand away from me. They're scared of me. But where Rabbi Lapin came, people were attracted to him. So he would talk to me about that. But in terms of, he had a great respect for Rabbi Lapin and a great love for Rabbi Lapin for changing his life. And he had tremendous love of the Lapin family for what they had accomplished. And for him, it was the fact that there were so many people turned on to Torah, and there were so many people who became open to learning, however they learned, whether they learned in a yeshiva, or whether they learned on their own, or whether they learned as a surfer in the ocean.
Right.
I mean, we know Jews who are Orthodox Jews who learn Torah surfing in the ocean. Their connection to Hashem is through being in the ocean. I have my connection to Hashem restoring old cars, or some with people, but it's different. It's like a creativity. Anyway, but I can't tell you more that there was I don't want to say a jealousy, but an envy that Meir Tamari had for Rabbi Lapin, a love and an envy.
And yet I'm not aware of any books that Rabbi Avram Chaim wrote, and I have Rabbi's book on the economics. So
he has 5 or 6 books. He has books on the Tanakh, he had books on the Haftorot. He has other books that are secular books on business ethics and on economics that were, read by professionals in colleges and universities. He taught at Bar Ilan. Dr. Tamari taught at Bar Ilan for 10, 12 years in the 60s and the 70s. He was a professor also. So he accomplished things that Rabbi Lapin didn't do, but yet it was Rabbi Lapin's magnetism that Dr. Tamari envied.
He was the poet more than the sculptor.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'll share one other thing that he shared with me that was very poignant, and I know this will resonate with some of you. He was married when he was 21 years old on the kibbutz. His wife's name was Chaviva. And they raised 4 children on the kibbutz until he left to move to Jerusalem. They moved to Jerusalem in 1960. He talked to me about his love for Chaviva. Chaviva means dearest. I mean, her name, Chaviva, the word Chaviva in Hebrew is beloved. And he spoke about his love for her. The closest I can tell you, I mean, it primed me. I'd never heard a man speaking his deepest feelings and his love for his wife. His wife passed away when they had been married about 12 or 13 years, 15 years. She had cancer and she passed away, and he talked about that loss, and he married Devorah, who was also a widow, who had 4 children. So they raised their 8 children together after Chaviva passed away. But the reason I mentioned Meir's heart is it wasn't until I heard my own father speak about my mother after my mother passed away that I had heard another man speaking poetry of his wife from his deepest heart. A man, Meir Tamari and my father were similar in that way, that they were very tough on the outside. They were not people who shared a lot of emotion. And to see Meir Tamari crying and showing emotion when he spoke about Chaviva, and to see my father crying and sharing emotion about my mother was so, it showed me how great a human being can be, that you can have so many aspects of your personality. And it gave me an access to be able to say, I can know myself and I can get to know others on these deeper hidden levels. I know that they're there. I know if I have the compassion and the empathy and the ability to listen and create enough trust and love, that those secret places will come out, and that person can share them as they need to, because love that's not shared is not the same as love that you hold in your broken heart. Anybody else?
Milt, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Milt. Ronnie Kaufman. I'm in Ashland, Oregon, and been a long time since we've met.
Ronnie, I'm so happy that you're here.
Me too. I just so enjoyed listening to you and listening to your stories. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And what I got from it was what made him such a great teacher for you was the great friendship that you guys shared with each other inside and out. And it was just so plain to see that. It was beautiful, beautiful. And I thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you.
Ronnie, thank you. Be healthy and well, and your friendship over, coming back to me. It's been 13 years. I haven't seen you for 13 years.
Well, 2012, so it was 9. It was
9 years. Okay,
in Colorado.
In Durango. Yes,
Durango.
yes.
That's where I met you.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, but we didn't. Oh, maybe so. I thought we were in Newfield together in 2000.
We were not in Newfield together.
Okay, so I met you in Durango. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you. It was just a pleasure just listening and hearing your voice. It was very calming and very reassuring. So you be well too. I hope you get to work on another Studebaker and enjoy it.
Thank you, Ronnie, so much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Karen? I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I do.
Hi. No, it was a lovely story that you shared with you and your teacher. I also thought about often if you if you go through life and you don't have a teacher, or there's a hiatus in between having teachers, life is also a teacher. And if you look at the things that go around you and the people you meet, the barriers, everything about you, you can learn a lot from just life. You can learn about from just being home during COVID. COVID is a teacher. So sometimes we don't always have teachers. Sometimes there are gaps between teachers, but we can always look at life as a teacher.
Karen, I want to share, I won't give any details, but you remember when you got married to Bobby, I
Yeah.
met your teacher and I got to spend time with your teacher.
Yeah.
That you had that special teacher. I don't know if you still do, but
I do. I do.
yes.
And now we're like you may have become friends or more,
I only spoke to her in Chicago, but I'm just saying this parenthetically that I know that you went out of your way to emphasize that this woman is your teacher. And I actually met with her privately because I wanted to get a sense of her to understand you more deeply.
yeah,
And I actually had that opportunity.
yeah.
So I appreciate it. And some of the people here have known Meir Tamari. You know, some of the people, many people have heard him, many when he came to California. Not everybody knew him as intimately, um, but the truth applies that when we put ourselves at the service of somebody else, or we put ourselves to listen or care about what somebody we open ourselves to their wisdom, it's going to have an effect on us.
Yeah.